So we've got a great panel here who've in a very organised fashion arranged themselves in the correct order of the slide. I don't know who was in charge of that, probably Nicole. I think we've got the opportunity here to get views from across the whole spectrum of the industry. So feel free to come up with your questions at any point. I'll stop at various opportune moments to ask for questions. But if you have something that you want to, that's a kind of a burning topic you want to get addressed, stick your hand up. So the first area I'd like to cover is to really look at the what we think is happening with the kind of the main trends in pay TV today. And there we're looking at things like what's happening with bundling, what's happening with some of these advanced services like network PVR or cloud DVR, restart, what's going on around EST, what's happening with some of the slightly more exotic things like 4K Ultra HD and VR, and what's happening maybe with new content categories like esports. So I'll run through the panel now, maybe starting from this end with Peter. If you could give me your view on what you think is the one biggest, most important trend in the pay TV industry right now, and feel free to just give a quick intro on who you are and where you are in your organisation, just so that people get there.
My organisation, there you go. So thank you very much. So hi everybody, I'm Peter Mercier. I work at Microsoft here in Europe. I've presented at one of these panels before, working in the Xbox group. So I'm responsible for our content and entertainment partnerships here in Europe. So that's largely about licensing music and video and some of the app partnerships that we've got on Xbox and other platforms. I think and it came out well in the previous presentation, I think the biggest issue for pay TV, putting it that way, I guess, is what our chief executive calls the digital transformation. So essentially, every industry becoming essentially a digital company, whether they're a car manufacturer or manufacturing, engines, Rolls-Royce for jets or whatever, or indeed any pay television company or broadcaster, right? So I think that digital transformation, we've seen lots of examples of it. How does the industry move? We call them skinny bundles or whatever, but essentially it's unbundling. How does that come out from digital? Personalization, recommendations, all those features are features of the pay television industry embracing, or in some cases resisting, or just that natural dynamic of digital transformation. I think that is the overwhelming trend. I mean, you can get into details of 4K or VR or whatever, but essentially it's that transformation that is critical. Our role as Microsoft is obviously to help that. And we sell a lot of business to people around the world, helping that transformation and helping people become digital companies. And I think that's probably the biggest trend I would see. And you could just look at that in different facets of everyone's business, probably in this room today.
Like it's good, big picture answer. Thank you. Nicole, over to you.
Okay, I'm working for ProSieben. I'm overseeing the distribution business, which means I'm responsible for all external platform deals, but also managing director of pay TV channels we have. And I would answer it a little bit differently because the German market really differs a lot from the UK and the US market. And the trends I see there is not necessarily only pay TV trends, because we have much bigger, as you know, free-to-air business in Germany than the pay business. Nevertheless, it goes like a red line across the whole content industry in Germany, is that the platforms are asking for additional rights, additional features. The ones you mentioned already, Toby, like network PVR, like instant restart. Also, a big trend goes to mobile in HD. So far, I must say no platform in Germany has HD content mobile yet in place. I mean, the out-of-home case, not the in-home case. And this is a trend where we can really see that a lot of movement is in there. And we expect that in 2017 there will be happening a lot in the market around those new rights. So far, we have already platforms in the German market who did the first experiments with instant restart, and it's adapted very well. The customers really like it a lot, that you can move back and start again. And also the network PVR thing is making up ground. Rights-wise, it's a little bit tricky because we at ProSieben, we are the mostly focused on entertainment content, and we produce a lot of shows by our own, but we also have a lot of Hollywood studio content on our channels. And it's not so easy to negotiate the rights with the studios, but we're really clearing them up. It's going to be, the right situation is going to be increasingly better, I would say, that we can really come to a certain percentage that we can offer to the customers. And this is a big trend. And of course, then pay TV penetration in Germany is increasing. And of course, we are noticing there, regarding the pay TV trends you've been asking, that the people are really looking for special genres in pay TV. And new genres that you already mentioned is definitely esports. This is something that we also can address and say this is the case. We did some experiments with esports at ProSieben, and it worked out quite well. It was actually in the free-to-air business, but we could also transfer it easily to pay TV. For now, we have 3 pay TV channels in place and are focusing on entertainment. And this is a case, and also enlarging them into the catch-up area and also new rights area.
Okay, great. That's really interesting. Thank you. And can I just ask you then?
Sure.
Germany is sort of historically, I guess, been known as a difficult market for pay TV. Difficult to get people to pay.
We're making up ground.
Well, yeah, and I think it's partly. Well, I guess the general kind of industry view is part of the reason for that is because free TV is so good.
That's right.
So why do people need to pay when they have such good free TV in their homes? Do you think that with the being able to make kind of new rights available to German viewers, they're going to be, what's the kind of business model around that? Is that something that you see as something that's going to generate additional kind of direct revenues?
Yeah.
Or is it something that's more about creating new advertising opportunities, or is it both?
Both, it's both. But it's a very good question, actually. It's definitely the case that in Germany, I would say over the last 4 years, a lot of things have happened. Of course, we increased our digital penetration. There's new business models coming into the market, and also new customers, younger people, younger audiences who are completely addicted to digital viewing habits already. And also the elderly are more used to pay now for additional features, for additional rights. And the platforms are currently offering those business models to the market against payment, which means, generally speaking, platforms offer additional rights such as instant restart, such as network PVR, such as HD, etc., against payment, which means that the people get used to high quality content, new rights, new features, that you have to pay for it, a certain amount of money. And this is really making up ground, and I would say we will see over the next couple of years that those types of business models are getting more and more sustainable, and more changing viewing habits will refer to that. So I would say people in Germany now are getting used to also pay higher amounts of money to watch television. It's by now in nothing comparable to the UK or the US, but it's really making up ground. And the offers get slightly more expensive, slightly more premium value, and the people like it and pay for it. Yeah.
Interesting. Excellent. Yeah. Great. So let's move over to James now from TalkTalk, and maybe you could just give a very quick brief on who TalkTalk are for our members of the audience who are not.
Absolutely. I can't believe anyone doesn't know who TalkTalk TV are. But, okay, so my name's James Thornby. I head up the content editorial team at TalkTalk TV. We're a UK-based pay TV operator, part of a telco, and we have both a pay TV service involving channel bundles, so entertainment boosts, including Sky One and Fox and Nat Geo and all those kind of channels, as well as kids propositions and Sky Sports and Sky Cinema, Box Nation, so a number of different SVOD packages as well. We also have a transactional store, so we had own and rent on Box, and we acquired Blinkbox, which was a TV store in the UK as well. And we've merged them recently. So yeah, my remit is effectively making sure that we're merchandising content across each of those areas and prioritizing content for marketing communications and marketing channels.
And so, I mean, in terms of the kind of big trend, or maybe a couple of trends that you see in pay TV today, what would from kind of your perspective of Talk, what would you say that is?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously these guys have talked about some macro trends and some big trends coming through. I think from the research, I saw that EST was bottom of the list in terms of features. So I might go to bat for the little guy on that one and just talk a little bit about some of the emerging trends within EST. So EST in the UK is in growth at the moment, which is really positive. So we're seeing it about 25% up in the first part of this year, which is again really positive. And I think that there's a number of things that are driving that. I think that ease and convenience is one of the most important ones. So certainly for us, we see through the set-top box that transactions are increasing. Having access through your main HDMI port or through your smart TV, the place where you go most often to watch TV, has really helped accelerate this. Obviously, part of the market is being driven by being able to watch in that way, but also get a physical copy through buy and keep with other providers. But I think that certainly ease and convenience is one of the biggest trends. Another thing that I'd note is that actually there's a lot of momentum shift amongst the studios and also amongst the distributors. So actual knowledge of what EST is and awareness of how you use it, how you get the content in the first place, still needs to be improved. The industry is trying to tackle it as a whole now, and there's a number of different bodies that are coming together and sharing ideas, sharing how digital messaging is put out there in marketing communications, for example. There's a more collaborative feel about that, so I think that's going to help with the education and help present a unified front for EST across the market. And I don't think we should forget that EST, you can have it from a movie's perspective, and in a one-off transaction, it can feel quite expensive. It's £10. However, it's great value if you're picking a family title and you're watching it 10 times. So I've just loaded up Sing for my holiday to Greece tomorrow, put that in front of the kids, and I'm sure I'll get every penny's worth on the plane, on the beach, just about everywhere. And also core franchises as well are doing really well in EST. It's the stuff that people want to watch over and over again. From a TV EST perspective, so something like Game of Thrones, that can give you access as a pay TV provider and a customer. It can give you access to content that isn't necessarily on your platform otherwise. So our customers, and we do get a lot in the call centres asking about Game of Thrones, we can say that, you can absolutely access it. You can access the previous seasons right now, and as soon as the last episode is aired on Sky Atlantic, you'll be able to get that too.
And I'm pleased someone wants to talk about EST, because I think it's kind of it's something that was kind of a flavour of the moment a couple of years ago, and now I think it's actually becoming quite significant. I mean, do you buy into the concept that EST offered by a pay TV operator like yourselves is something that can prevent churn? Because I think that's something that there's I think there's a sort of general view that maybe it does. Do you have any? Do you think that's right? You got any evidence on that?
Yeah, there's definitely some evidence to support it. So there are definitely customer cohorts that have bought a large number of EST films, and they tend to be a little bit stickier. I know that Comcast in the US, for example, will quite publicly state that they see that pretty much across the board. I see some evidence of it for sure. I think that from a value pay TV operator like TalkTalk are, we tend to operate at the lower price end of the market. I think that EST gives you an opportunity to offer your customers even more value. Like I said, if you're watching it over and over again, that's helpful. But if you start looking at functionality like Complete My Season, which we'll be bringing in soon from a TV perspective, you are just paying the difference between the episodes you've already paid for and a series. So that in itself represents value. I think that there's an opportunity in the market for someone to look at TVOD to EST upgrade. So for people who've already rented, enjoyed that experience, and it's something that can't be replicated in physical because that once the money's spent, you can't track it.
Yeah.
Whereas in digital, you can. I think there's a real opportunity there.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's move on to Michiel. If you could tell us a little bit about Ginx TV, or you called Ginx Esports now, is that?
Yeah, Ginx Esports TV.
Yeah, sorry for not getting it right on the slide.
That's all right. We are an international esports TV channel, young company, 50 people based in London, not far from here, but we reach 54 million, about 50 million international households with a linear TV service. In the UK, we're carried by Virgin and Sky, and hopefully soon by my neighbor over here. Effectively, we talk both to the newfound platforms that we've seen so many little blocks on the chart in the earlier presentation, and we talk also to the big established pay TV platforms for our distribution. And our distribution comes from both. So we've recently signed with DSTV in South Africa, a big satellite platform, but also with Sony View in the States, which we're launching this week. So we distribute our channel to all of those type of platforms. And what I think is interesting to see is how the existing platforms are dealing with the sort of wave, the veritable tsunami of these new players coming towards them, and how they are deploying both offensive and defensive strategies. And I think what is interesting to look at is how platforms are onboarding new media brands. I think we will come to talk about it in a second, but that's an interesting way of working with this. But I also think what we're going to see in the next couple of years is this tremendous movement of the tectonic plates of all the sort of big forces that have a desire on the ultimate relationship with the consumer. And it'd be fascinating to see how, which relationships become collaborative and peaceful, harmonic collaborations, and which ones are going to be more competitive. And that landscape over the next, it would be fascinating to see that play out.
Maybe we can just kind of talk a little bit about esports, because a bit more was said. Nicole already mentioned that. I mean, you're, and I'm not sure how much the audience know about the whole amazing world of esports. So, I mean, I think one of the the interesting things with your business is the esports world kind of started on the computer platforms and on consoles with Peter at this end. So, and you're now bringing that into a TV channel, in some cases across kind of traditional, old-fashioned platforms. So, how did you kind of come to the view that that's a good place for esports to be? And maybe you could just give us a very kind of quick, big picture kind of view on where esports is going and how big it's going to be, because there's loads of kind of projections out there of it becoming a really, really massive, much, bigger than it is already.
Yeah, I mean, the latter point is, it is already a very, very big phenomenon. A number of times I hear, people talk about esports as the next big thing. I mean, it is a pretty big thing already in terms there are 250 million active participants in esports. A vast majority of them are women. It's essentially a digital world of competitive video gaming, but it's growing increasingly mainstream. It's increasingly being treated inside esports as a proper sport. Esports players are living in bespoke environments with nutritionists and physical trainers, and they put in 8 hours a day of work to be at their best. The best of them make tens of millions of dollars a year. An esports player now would rank as a top esports player, would maybe be a top 60, top 50 tennis player, for example, in terms of earnings. And the whole industry as a result of it, and all the sort of millennial, digital, global audience that is attracted by it, it's kind of the dream audience. It's a sort of dream world for any sports league. So you see these fantastic movements of big traditional sports teams like Paris Saint-Germain and West Ham in the UK and Man City, moving into the virtual world of esports and trying to combine that with the sort of trying to combine the old world of football with the virtual world of FIFA, for example. And why we think it's a good thing to bring it to television is that for a lot of people, it's pretty damn inaccessible. I don't know whether you've ever watched an esports event, but if you're not into it, and it is not as self-explanatory. Some esports, like FIFA, which is a small one, are easier to understand because it's mimicking a football game, and a football game is pretty much understandable. You have to score goals. But with League of Legends, that's harder, or Dota. These are very complicated strategic matches that are taking place. So our role in the world of esports is to help the growth, into mainstream. So the way we present esports on Ginx is to be resolutely mainstream, a bit more explanatory about what is going on, provide another point of view that takes people by the hand. And our balancing act is to not alienate the core players and the people who are really into their sport, and not feel that they are not spoken to. So the balance is speak to the core, but also attract the mainstream. And therefore, we kind of help the traditional platforms, the satellite and cable platforms that carry us, to kind of build the bridge between this incredible large online world and their TV platform, because we cross both, we sit in between those two worlds, if you will.
Okay, great, thank you. Anybody have any questions for the panel at this point?
I think it's interesting just on the esports piece, though. I mean, it's why has it come about? I mean, we've been seeing in the games industry Hollywood movie-style budgets for production of big games, whether it's some of ours, Halo or Forza or Gears of War, that kind of stuff, or games from our partners. Big Hollywood-style budgets, hundreds of millions of dollars, and people wouldn't be spending that money if there wasn't an audience out there to buy these games and the tribes around them. And obviously Xbox Live, originated in multiplayer gaming, and esports is an extension of that. Essentially, because there are these great tribes of people who love, and the passion of any sort of Arsenal Man United match or whatever is replicated in some of this competitive gameplay. So that attracts a big audience. The funding is there, and I love the debate about is it really a sport, and it's kind of it is a good debate, right? You can imagine there's people around the world who are like, oh, you're not outside and you're not getting any fresh air, and this is outrageous that you're trying to compare yourself to British rowing or something. But it is an interesting debate, and there's a massive audience out there, and it is hugely interactive, and you only have to look at a couple of stats around Twitch or around Beam that we have, or indeed the channel side of things with Ginx and so on, to see how big that audience is and how much money is piling into it.
By the way, no debate at Ginx about whether it's a sport or not. I just want to put it on the record that it's a sport. We're packaged in the sports category with a lot of our platforms, it is a new sport for sure.
That's right.
But it's a sport, all right.
But that's an indication of how it's going mainstream, is right? Because the Daily Mail will write an article that sort of, that's not really sport, So it's as the audience becomes more mainstream, these questions surface, which I think is interesting itself.
Okay, great. So the audience is quiet at the moment. Okay. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the virtual TV operators, because I think that's a really interesting connection with what we were just talking about there with esports, because obviously that's all about kind of either looking at the content on your PCs or whatever, or on consoles. And it's kind of through all those devices the virtual operators are starting to deliver kind of full TV services. And obviously this is something that's really, I guess, most developed in the US, where you have the issue where pay TV and the kind of bundles that come with that are pretty expensive. You're talking about spending over $100 a month on that. Whereas typically in Europe, pricing is considerably lower. Looking at the trends we're now seeing with some of the services in Germany, and with I guess to some extent Now TV here in the UK, and smaller startup players like Molotov, and which by the way have an investment from Sky, so they're obviously attracting attention from big players. I mean, how do you see the potential for that the development of those kind of businesses in Europe? Do you think there's going to be lots of them? Are they going to be successful, or are they going to find it really difficult up against the kind of established pay TV operators? If anybody, Nicole, you'd like to comment on that?
I think it's a very interesting area of business which is developing at the moment in Germany. And so far we have the most famous players, you already mentioned them, was like Magin, for example, in Germany, and also Zattoo is quite big. Then we have smaller ones like TV Spielfilm. TV Spielfilm is an interesting example because they developed their business approach out of an EPG, famous EPG, and also newspaper for TV programs, and some other players. And there's quite a few ones who want to enter the market. And there's also big players who are preparing to get ready and to enter into the market. And the players you mentioned already that are already active in the US and partly in the UK. So what we can say is that Magin and Zattoo, they are already operatively working.
They've been there for quite a long time as well.
Zattoo is there for quite a long time, and Magin is not so long. It's like 2-3 years now. 3 years actually, and Zattoo is there for quite a long time. And the approaches are slightly different. Zattoo, as a first step, went into the market and they created a huge free TV pack. And they said, okay, with the public service broadcasters on top, if they have like big football events or something like sports events, I can create mass auditories. And then they created various packages, like upsell packages, where you can buy in, first of all, other free TV packages, for example, in HD, and then evolving into pay TV. Magin started with both, with free and pay at the same time, and with a complete full pack. And then they did like a trial period and had like also in a year where we had big sports events, because this always attracts masses. They had like free trial for I think 3 or 4 months or something, and also created a push. And for now we see that they're really growing and they're really making up ground. And but so far we can't really see a trend where we would say, okay, people really move away from television and stay only with those OTT players. So far, it's more like additional services. Okay. So like to complete your house, for example, if you have like 2 TV screens somewhere in the house, you use this a second or third screen. Or if you go out, for example, and you want to continue watching your football game or whatever, or your show like Germany's Next Top Model, for example, we really see an impact. And what they really did increasingly well, I would say, is to really use the new features like instant restart, for example. Zattoo is really doing very well on this in Germany, and also other features they have in place, and the people really like it, that they can say, okay, I missed this right now, I go to the catch-up section, or I go back and start again. But for now, I would say it's not yet in place in Germany that you could really say it's a cord-cutting thing, and you can really see the people getting rid of their cable access or of their satellite access and really only go for Zattoo or only go for Magin. But it's coming. It's definitely coming. And I think, as you mentioned already, the examples from the US, with Amazon, with YouTube, they are preparing themselves. And as soon as this is going to happen, also with Apple, for example, then this could be a different movement. This could create really movement.
Do you think that'll be difficult then for a kind of a smaller player like a Magin or a Zattoo to survive in the face of that kind of massive competition?
Absolutely, that's an interesting perspective. We think so far that the market is well prepared, but as soon as the bigger players are really coming into the market, I think this could be an issue, because for the time being now we have really competition in the market. And the question will be how this competition will be evolving in the future. And it could happen that there's consolidation, not necessarily over the next 1 or 2 years, but it could happen, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a point to make about these virtual operators?
Well, I think maybe it's interesting. There's a little platform in the States that's run by Elation. It's called Crunchyroll, and it's for Japanese anime. And then they have recently started to do a thing called Verve, which is specifically it's sort of an OTT service of their own for gamers. And maybe it's interesting to see that players like Michiel will find it hard to be small competitors to the bigger players. But if you super specialize in this space, that might be an interesting development. And maybe that's a stronger play than trying to mimic the bigger player.
Right. Yeah.
Peter, I mean, you obviously have kind of loads of different content partners coming onto your whole big platform world. How do you see these kind of companies be? I mean, how do you work with them? Are you open to bringing all those guys on board, or?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when we ran a curated service on Xbox. That was really just a function of the fact that we were seeking, from a technology perspective, to drive specific unique features and so on. But now, as Windows, essentially, it's an open platform. So, people building apps on our platform to access the Windows universe. 500 million Windows 10 devices now around the world, or accessing Xbox One or Xbox One S, or indeed the new Xbox coming out later in the year. They just build an app on our platform, and that's straightforward, right? So that's an open platform. We work with them in different ways to try and drive usage and engagement and so on. But essentially, part of my effort is to try and make sure that we have the important partners on the platform in any given territory, rather than just rolling out global ones, because we want to give people choice, right? It goes back to that digital transformation story that we mentioned at the beginning, right? Part of this stuff is just making sure that the Magins of the world, or the YouTubes of the world, or the Ginx of the world, they're all available to our consumers, and people can navigate their way and pick and choose what they like.
Okay, great, thank you. James, I mean, I guess a lot of these new virtual players are coming with kind of skinnier bundles of content. That's how they're trying to position themselves as not only having all these great new kind of features and functionality, but also being cheaper than the bundle and more flexible. What's your what's your view on that? How do you see that as being? And I'm particularly interested as well how TalkTalk positions as a kind of value player in the UK for that kind of challenge. I guess starting, but probably going to be increasing.
Absolutely. So I think it's a real positive in the market, because if you look at, when I look at our research, all of it says that increasingly customers don't just want to pay for what they want to watch. As importantly, if not more importantly, they don't want to pay for what they don't want to watch. So it's stripping out those channels that they've got no interest in. It's stripping out the content that they've got less interest in. And as a value player, for us, that's positive. And obviously, it keeps us honest. It keeps other pay TV operators honest who have got large customer bases, customers who are paying a lot of money. And it requires us to constantly justify why they are paying the amount of money they are, and help them get the most amount of value out of their package that they can. So I think it's really positive.
And do you think, I guess, Sky in the UK has sort of taken the view a few years ago to launch Now TV as a kind of, no subscription, lower sort of market, more flexible, product that isn't kind of part of a bigger bundle, and to some extent sort of take the risk of potentially cannibalizing their own business, but kind of just going, right, okay, we need to do this because if we don't, somebody else will. Is that how would you look at something like that? Do you think that's might be something you have to do, or you?
I don't see it us having a sub brand as something we need to do. Effectively, we are the value brand. As I see it, Now TV is a necessity because it limits spin down risk from the more premium packs. So we are perfectly happy to give our customers the best value in whichever way, shape or form. We have certainly a lower ARPU than Sky TV does. And so, yeah, I don't think with our base we'd be afraid to continue to be a value provider. The way in which we distribute that content, whether it is through solely set-top box or whether it's through device options going forwards, now that's something that strategically you've always got to look at. But yeah, I don't see a need to create a sub-brand for that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, so let's move on and talk a little bit about content discovery and recommendations and all of that area. So I was quite surprised when we had the research came up that global search wasn't something that really kind of jumped out to people as being important. So I always personally find it it's a challenge when my kids are going, oh, can we buy this piece of content? I say, well, have you checked all the services we've got yet? No, we found it's on Netflix, so then I save a bit of money. So that's my personal global search requirement. But I think it's something that we're starting to see it happen. But do you think? Any of you jump in? But do you think global search is something that's important, or do you think that the whole kind of people are just happy getting all these kind of recommendations delivered to them, and if is kind of that sort of ability to search across all content that's on a platform, is that something that's difficult to do? Is that something that you support, or do you think otherwise?
I think habit is a very powerful thing. I mean, we talked, I think James mentioned it earlier about EST and discs. I mean, for people who are sort of digital purists, the idea seems completely odd. But if you're trying to address a mass market audience and convert them into EST, that journey is an important one. And it may not be around forever, but that journey is important. I think same with global search. When we pioneered a voice-activated search on Xbox with Kinect many years ago, we were like, yeah, this is fine, fantastic technology. People just talk to their TV and it works great. Actually, people, used it and it did work great in demos and it was a great thing. You'd be able to say, oh, these are amazing. But it was still not naturally intuitive enough to be something that people would create a habit. And I think that's still the case with all kinds of these things today. And so there's a big journey that still has to happen. And so even on our console, people go into things that they've, applications they've pinned to the front screen. They'll go to the iPlayer, they'll go to YouTube, they'll go to Netflix, and then they're into the little search functionality, into those little app islands. And we'd love to have a platform search, and we do, but actually from a usage perspective, people are still going into just from habit. So I think that is still, if you can get that natural user interface happening, voice in particular, more ubiquitous, working better, I think that's the way you break it, but I think habit is strong.
We see that a lot as well. There's a number of features that we roll out and we go, do you know what? Research tells us this is gonna change the habits, it's gonna change, and people continue to, in the majority of cases, to do what they did before, and it has an incremental impact. And you can slowly layer someone, so converting people into an on-demand environment, for example, you can slowly get people there. But for it to change overnight, it's really difficult. However, I think if you have a complete UI that is dedicated to it, and that is really hard to do, as an aggregator, so something that pulls in content recommendations in your viewing environment from your Netflix account, from Amazon, from your pay TV service, from iPlayer, I think that could be really powerful, and I think there's a really good example of an app that does it. So Utelly, I think, does it from a surfacing recommendations perspective well. Obviously, it's not necessarily in your main viewing environment, and so there's a disconnect there, and ease and convenience is what will win out when you're looking for something to watch at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day or the middle of the day. So yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity for global discovery to make customers' lives easier.
Maybe I can take this question as perspective of a broadcaster, because I think it's slightly different. Of course, we understand that the customer's focus is key here. And since we are operating in Germany an SVOD service called Maxdome, which is the third biggest player in the market, we know that recommendations and discovery is key there, right? We have a team of people really taking care, especially and dedicated on Maxdome about the recommendations. We have like testimonials, famous testimonials who give out recommendations, who help the people find the right contents and stuff like this. This is really completely key and important for every customer who's looking for certain content. Nevertheless, for us as broadcasters, and I think there all broadcasters would agree, it's key that our brands can be found in the digital landscape. And we had lots of discussions with all different kinds of platforms, now externally spoken, that this is something that is really, let's say, difficult to handle in the digital area. And our prerequisite as ProSieben is always that the brands are there and that you can see that our content is ProSieben content. And of course, if you then go for global search or voice control that you mentioned, and this is also now coming in Germany and really getting quite I wouldn't say too famous yet, but maybe it's not easy to change habits, as you say. But it's
German language training. That's what it is.
Exactly. but it's there, and the people are trying it, and it's working out well. And this is something where we really say, okay, there we have to keep an eye on, because, of course, for example, you say Big Bang Theory, and there appear like 3 or 4 providers, not necessarily only ProSieben, and this is an issue for competition.
Yeah.
But we're facing that competition, it's okay, but you have to really have the brand of ProSieben and have to have, as a customer, the opportunity to really dive into our content experience, because we, for example, if we offer on our platforms, the Big Bang Theory content, for example, you can find behind-the-scenes content or stuff like this, additional content that is also really interesting for customers, and this might be a differentiator in terms of competition. But for us, I just want to highlight this, that this is for broadcasters key in the digital landscape, that you don't lose the brands, that it's not that everything disappears and it's just the content you're looking for, that it's really key to see our show, for example, Germany's Next Top Model, very, very successful show in Germany, or The Voice or others, that they really can be found as ProSieben shows, and this is something that's really key for us.
Okay, great, thank you. So, any questions? Yes, the gentleman there, great.
Thanks,
if you
buddy.
could give your name and company if you have one.
Yep, sure. Hi, David Faulkner from YouView. And as someone that has already got a global search on the platform, I thought I'd highlight, if you do it properly, it's not just about search, it's about what else you can do with that information that you've got. And from a broadcaster's perspective, certainly it's useful there that you could be watching or searching for one particular episode, or looking through your guide and looking at the information of an episode. You can click I and then it will show you what else is available from that specific broadcaster. For example, you might have missed the first 2 episodes or something, you've gone forward in the guide to record the series, but you can click I for information, and then we can surface the previous 2 episodes that you've missed, and obviously play back from there. So there are other benefits than just the global search, but it is fantastic. One point, or more of a question, because that was more of a statement, is how we see maybe things like Amazon Alexa, Google Home, and other voice searches are available, impacting this sort of stuff. You know, can you say, Alexa, what services is Mission Impossible on? And Alexa then gives you the results.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, I think.
Yeah. It's bound to be.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because I know, I think if you ask Alexa what the news is, I think it probably gives you the news from the BBC in the UK, but I'm sure it probably gives you different news in
or Seattle, Washington. Yeah.
That's right.
Any thoughts about the those kind of issues, particularly around voice activations? I know that was like a really hot thing at CES this year as well. Everyone was talking about voice.
It's kind of who controls the voice. Where does the voice point you? The voice of Alexa is in our home, and we ask her all kinds of questions, and you don't quite know where the curation happens inside Alexa's brain, and so that's a question. But I think in terms of this sort of search and presentation to the consumer, I think personally as a consumer, I know the end point. The end point is very clear. You need some sort of device that super aggregates all content, that gives you then multiple ways to ask about that content, whether it's through Alexa, or whether it's through universal search in type, or whether it is just looking at recommendations of what my friends are watching, or what the best critic in the world is recommending, or an IQ scale. This is intelligent programming. This is dubbing. Whatever you want, whatever flavor of aggregation you want. I think that's the end point. What I learned yesterday from one of the platforms there was it's very hard technologically to do. Even if you said today, I've got the best will of everybody in the room to super aggregate all of the services that are available in the UK under one umbrella, it's a very tough execution, I believe. So we're some time away. I think the will is there partially, but I think even the will is not quite there for everybody. But from my perspective as a consumer, I know where it should go really quickly.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? So couple of minutes left before we go for drinks. One sort of final topic maybe we can touch on, talk about something that's kind of right at the kind of edge of what we're looking at here, which is virtual reality and augmented reality. There's been lots of talk about that in the last couple of years, but I'm intrigued about what's the you can see, I think, the application of that in the games world, but what about in the TV world, and is there an intersection between the games and the TV world? Any views on that area?
Yeah, I mean, we are investing very heavily in, and have done for a while, on the spectrum of activities from virtual reality through augmented reality. And so, you go to those conferences and people talk about XR because you've got MR and VR and AR, all this sort of stuff. I think for us, it is very early days. I mean, we will launch later this year on Windows, what we call Windows Mixed Reality, which is a platform with a head-mounted display tethered to your Windows PC, which enables essentially a virtual reality experience out of the box. And that is about, for us, about gaming, as you say. It's about content consumption, but it's also about productivity and creation. So you think about, and this is not just about people watching 360-degree videos, right? The classic sort of GoPro videos you might watch, or Red Bull or whatever. It's actually an immersive way, and this is true with many of the devices that are out there today. Watching television video in a traditional 2D way, but in an immersive environment, right? With a display on it that's got 90 frames, 90 hertz resolution, 1400 pixels per eye. It's high in resolution. With your headphones on, and you can watch your Netflix, you can watch TV in this environment. And you imagine a student at university in a dorm room doing that in an immersive way. So there's an element of that, and then there's all the way up to what we call augmented reality, which is how you in a room like this, you would see the room, and you could have digital artifacts on the table, the chair, and you could change those out in a design sort of way. You could change the color of the chairs and say, what does this room look like if it was less purple and more red? What if we changed the chairs to benches, how does that work? And so that's a design-enabled functionality. And we think all of that stuff is going to be transformative, not just for consumption and entertainment and for gaming, but also for design and for computing generally, as people start getting more immersive into what they're doing, whether that's working through design or entertaining themselves. So we're investing very heavily in that, and you'll see more of that from us obviously later in the year at E3 in a couple of weeks, and then towards the autumn when we launch a bunch of these things in the market.
You come back and give us a big presentation next year.
Yeah, but for us it all started with gaming because, as I mentioned earlier with Xbox Live, I mean, the idea of being immersed in a game and interacting with others in a virtual world, having an avatar, all these sorts of things are normal to a gaming audience. And so bringing that to a virtual world is actually it's not a big leap for that community. And as we broaden it out to a wider market, I think that becomes even more compelling.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's sort of virtual reality headsets, and it's sort of normal to the gaming world. It's accepted. If there's a big tournament out now, there's a company in the States called Sliver who is producing the sort of virtual reality streams alongside the normal broadcast feeds. And the question is really whether you need to bring that into television. or whether you leave that on a pure online side, and is there a bridge to be built and
That's right.
enhancing the television? And I think Microsoft is in a great place to answer begin to answer some of those questions.
Yeah, but I don't think everyone's going to be watching or producing 360-degree videos. I don't think you're going to watch Top Gear next year, in 360. There'll be great things. Obviously, the BBC have done some great stuff on 360 with Planet Earth, for example, but that doesn't mean the whole show is shot that way. Yeah. So I don't think it's less about that, I think, and more about either watching something in an immersive environment or, at the moment anyway, enterprise experiences around design that are obviously apart from gaming.
James, Nicole, is this kind of all XR? So good to learn a new acronym.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Peter. The whole virtual reality thing, is that something that's on the agenda at your companies right now, or is it something you see kind of down the line in the future, maybe?
It's super interesting. It's a really interesting area. I think that for us, again, as a value provider and with our base, it's something where it's an area we'd probably follow into rather than lead, but it's a really, I think I'm fascinated to see where it's going to go.
Yeah, more or less same here. We did some experiments at ProSiebenSat.1 and really also deep dives into those segments. For now, since we are really very, very much entertainment focused at ProSieben, this is something where we said we are not yet there. It's more like you said, it's more an esports, a gaming thing. It's there's certain segments where this really fits perfectly in. For the contents we have on our channels, so far we don't see necessarily the need to really heavily invest into those segments, but nevertheless, with our digital entities, we're really focusing very much on this and really had some deep dives already, and it could be that in the future this could create real business cases. We also had some experiments with Samsung and stuff. But for now, it's a little bit too far away from the core business we have content-wise on ProSieben.
Okay, great. Well, let's come back next year and see where we are with XR then. So.